What's going on, guys? It's Kitten of Doom, and in today's video we are going to be going all over Discordia and how to level her abilities and what build I like to build on her. And she is the newest mage in SMITE right now, and she's a Roman mage. So let's start with her abilities and what they do. Her first ability is called Unruly Magic, and Discordia sends out an orb of Unruly Magic to a location that damages any enemies it hits along the way. At the location, it will break down into 6 minor projectiles that fire out in all directions, damaging any enemies hit and bouncing off of walls. So this is Discordia's main lane clear ability, and it's the ability you want to be leveling first. It does a shit ton of damage, and even her projectile little orbs can even get you kills, so it's a really fun ability. Love the sound effect on it, and pretty straightforward, just lane clear, and it's her main damaging ability. Second ability is called Strife. Discordia creates an area of strife that damages all enemies hit. If 2 or more enemy gods are hit at the same time, they will be afflicted by madness for 1 second, forcing them to fight each other for additional damage. The same is true for minions, and if a single target is selected, they will become rooted for 1 second. This ability is insane on her, creating madness for 1 second for forcing the enemy team to hit each other is amazing, and even the 1 second root is insane for a mage. So I like leveling this ability second. It's a big AoE square, and a lot of people get annoyed by this ability because of how good it is. So when you get hit by it, it's just it hits like a truck. So third ability is called Erratic Behavior, and Discordia leaps a short distance and creates an area of confusion where she lands that persists for 5 seconds. While inside the area, she becomes stealth and gains bonus movement speed, and her first and second ability cooldowns are reduced by an additional amount every 0.5 seconds that she remains in the area. And attacking from this area briefly reveals you, so just keep that in mind. And it is a pretty short leap, but it is sort of an escape for her. She can get out of certain situations if you can juke people the right way. But in-game I'll show you what I typically like to do with it. And her ultimate is called Golden Apple of Discord. Discordia throws her apple that damages and passes through minions and bounces off walls. If the apple hits an enemy god, it will damage them and force them to hold the apple. Gods holding the apple will become intolerable, causing them to be crippled, intoxicated, while they constantly boast. At the end of the duration, the apple will detonate, dealing damage and spreading the effects to nearby gods. So this is pretty much like a Bacchus Intoxicate, Cupid Heart Bomb, Hercules Noxel. Like, there's a bunch of things going into this, but pretty much you throw it onto someone, and then if they detonate it onto their allied god, they pass the apple to them, and it will deal additional damage to them as well. And her passive is called Contest of Gods, and Discordia is constantly comparing herself and her teammates to see who is best. Whichever god on her team has top damage dealt to enemy players will receive a power buff that scales off of Discordia's level. So they gain physical or magical power from this, so it's a pretty good passive. It gives a buff to your allied teammate that's already doing pretty well, so it can help them snowball even more. So definitely a pretty good passive for her, and helps out your team a lot, and it even lets you be buffed if you've done the most damage. So the way I like to build her obviously is to get her 1 for wave clear. She has pretty decent wave clear if you build Soulstone, so definitely probably not the best wave clear out of all mages, but it's still pretty good. Level 2, it just depends on if you want to get your 3 to have a leap if you're fighting a lot. Typically I'd recommend this if you expect to be ganked or if you're worried about dying early. Other than that, if you're pretty safe, go ahead and pick up your 2 just for more minion damage and wave clear. And then pick up your 3 just to get out of any other sticky situations. And we want to be maxing her 1 first, getting her ultimate at level 5. I like maxing Strife second just because of the extra damage it does, because pretty much mid to late game you can 2-shot someone, use your 2 and your 1, and they're dead instantly pretty much. You can, if you want to, level up your 3. It doesn't do any increased damage, but it does increase the movement speed and cooldown you get, but I typically just like doing that, leveling up the Strife second. I normally do level up her ult every chance I get just because the damage goes up and the detonate damage as well. And this is what it typically looks like at level 15. Then you want to be maxing out her 3 last and her ults. And that is what I typically do. Okay, now that we're in jungle practice, we can show you a little bit more of what she does. Typically in mid lane I do Bumba's Mask and Soulstone. Bumba's Mask for the jungle camp sustain, and it's easier for her to solo let's mid and back harpies by herself. I just like doing that as the safe way, and then you end up with 2 health pots and 2 mana pots. Typical build I've liked building on her. I always do penetration boots. I like Book of Thoth for a ton of magical power and mana. She can stack it pretty easily as well. Third, I normally always go Spear of Desolation. I love this item on a lot of mages just because of its magical penetration and its 10% cooldown. And the passive's nice on it as well. I just love all the stats on this. Don't forget to buy Divine Ruin if there is healing on the enemy team, or if they are building a lot of magical protections like on their Warrior and Guardian, pick up Obsidian Shard. I always like doing Spirit of Desolation, and if they do end up having a lot of magical protection, I like doing Obsidian Shard. And then same with the healers, just pick up Divine. Then you're going to be selling these. Chronos Pendant is never a bad option on her, just so she can spam a lot more of her abilities. If you don't want to be using your 3 for the extra cooldown, go ahead and pick up Chronos Pendant. Never hurts. A lot of magic power and MP5. You're always going to be wanting Rod Up to Hootie, but your last item is up to you. Some people like building Bane Cross, gives a ton of magical power and gives her that sustain from lifesteal. Lately, I've been kind of liking Book of the Dead because it gives a bunch of health, and that passive health shield helps her stay alive. So I've been liking to experiment with that. Another fun one, Soul Reaver. If you really want to one-shot people and you're really far ahead, I'd recommend going Soul Reaver. Another one, if you're having problems staying alive and you need that extra sustain, go ahead and pick up Ethereal Staff. Really good, helps you have some crowd control reduction and extra health, and then your abilities do 5% of their max health, so it's always a pretty good option to do.
Ooh,
so let's have the build look like this. You can also, instead of Book of Thoth, pick up a Doom Orb, which I never used to build because it wasn't that great, but they just buffed the shit out of it, which you have 40 stacks on it now, and they added the better MP5 and magical power, I believe. So this is another thing you could do if you want to snowball early game. Late game, you probably do want to sell your Doom Orb for something, maybe like a Chronos Pendant. But other than that, that's the typical build I would recommend doing.
Looks painful.
So let's just see how much this does with her. And I'll show you what her 1 looks like. So her 1's targeter is really interesting. So it is a ball, and wherever that little circle is, that's where her ball is going to stop. So it passes through Odin, and then it jumps up and bounces, and then has all of those extra projectiles going outward. There's been many of times where I've actually gotten kills with those little projectiles, so it's a really good ability. So make sure whenever you're doing this, you want to have it pass through them, but still have that ball hit down on them. So really good ability. And her 2 looks like this. It's just a straightforward box, and if you put it under someone, it roots them. And if it's 2 or more gods and you put that under them, with 2 or more gods in that circle, they have madness, kind of like circuit, how you actually attack your teammate. So, and that works with minions as well. If you put this on minions, they also have the madness proc to them, so they attack each other just like that. So really good ability on her. It is insanely OP. I love it. And her 3 is a really short range dash, but she can get out of certain situations when using this. She does have immunity frames while she travels to that little circle, so right there when she is flying in the air. And I gain extra movement speed in this, and I'm also invis in that circle, so you can try and juke around people, but if they have big AoE abilities, they're just gonna put them on your circle, so just be careful with that. And this is what her typical combo is. You want to put your 2 down and 1, and you're gonna be chunking their health. They're pretty much gonna be either dead or extremely one-shot. So 2, 1, and then you have your little projectiles that are going down. And then if you want to throw out your abilities again, her cooldowns are reduced while you're in this little invisible field. So if you want to be extremely aggressive after you used your first combo, go ahead and do that, and you're going to be putting out insane damage numbers. So something like this, and then put, while your team's fighting, be in your little bubble, and then you can throw out some other abilities. This is her ultimate, so it's kind of like a Hercules boulder and Nox ult looking thing. So it does bounce off walls. It does bounce off of Ymir wall and Thor wall, any player made walls, so just be careful with that. And you throw it onto someone, and they spam taunt, and they're intoxicated and crippled. And if any of their allies are in that big AoE circle at the end of its detonation, then they get it put onto them as well. So it's a really good ability if you can hit it onto someone. So like if I was the teammate and I was in that circle, it would get passed to me. But it doesn't pass to any other people, it just passes one time. And remember that Discordia is CC immune while she's throwing her apple, just like how Nox is CC immune while she's throwing her big orb. So you can get out of some pretty decent ultimates, kind of like if Fenrir's chasing after you, trying to bite you, try and throw that. Or even if Ares is chaining you or Daji, you can throw your ult and you won't be chained by them. So let's go test out this build on Raw.
Betray your brothers.
But yeah, she pretty much just one-shots, and if I get something like, if I remove Bancrofts and get something like Soul Reaver,
Fight for my amusement.
it's pretty nasty. So like I mentioned before, she can work with some other items in that 6th slot, kind of like Soul Reaver, Chronos Pendant, Ethereal Staff, Bancroft's Book of the Dead. It's all up to personal preference, but that is how you play her. And let's just show an ult on Raw.
To the fairest goes the torment.
So her ult's really funny, just how people spam taunt. She's just a super good mage. She's gonna be really good in competitive, I think. But that is basically how you play her. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I'd love to answer them, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!